What's going on? Ryan from the MTG Homebrew Network here again to talk about a deck that I'm really excited to share. I've been having a really good time playing this deck actually for a while. I've been considering the things that I really enjoy about Magic and trying to, for lack of a better way to explain it, feel something again. There was a kind of like demystification of myself, of having problems enjoying things, but I really assess what I needed and what I want to get out of the game, and I've come to really like narrow it down to a couple things, and I can get into that in a different video, but this isn't about that. This is about a deck that I enjoy. This is Zirilan of the Claw. Zirilan is a Vishino shaman, I believe. It doesn't say so on the card. It's from Mirage. This is before Legends had types. Zirilan is a 3/4 for 3 red, so 5 mana. Vishino shaman. And if you look closely, Zirilan is standing in front of the giant dragon with the big wings. Zirilan does not have flying. Zirilan is just a little lizard, big stick. And Zirilan says, 1 red tap. Search your library for a dragon card and put it into play as though it were just played. Shuffle your library afterwards. That creature is unaffected by summoning sickness. Remove the creature from the game at end of any turn. So in new time speak, Zirilan says, and I'll bring it up on the actual. Search your deck for a dragon permanent card, put that card into play, then shuffle. That dragon gains haste until in turn, exile at the beginning of the next end step. What does this do? This lets you have a toolbox of dragon creatures that you can tutor for from your library and put them directly into play for 3 mana. If you're counting, it's actually 8. That's Zirilan plus the activation, but you're not usually playing that in one turn, so you can invest 5 and then 3. And that's no cheap trick. That is a reasonable cost for the effect. And if you look at it in the lens of paying 8 for a dragon, that's not super great, but it means that you don't have to have them in your hand, which is really like good utility. You can have other cards in your hand and just commit 3 mana in one turn to putting a dragon into play. So some of the dragons that we have, starting from the top, and one of the most important ones is Ancient Copper Dragon. This card says, whenever Ancient Copper Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. You create a number of treasures equal to the result. I'll be perfectly honest. I've never rolled less than 13, so I have bias. I think this card is absolutely absurd. It's insane how good it is. You can just put 13 token artifacts into play that make you mana. On average, it's 10, but because I'm just lucky, I guess I get 13 on average. It's wild. And I've had such a good time playing this card. I'm such a fan. I don't think it's fair by any means, but I do think it's a creature that can die in combat, and there are ways to deal with it. So I think it's inherently fair for 2023 Magic. Bogarden Hellkite, when it enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage, divided as you choose among any number of targets. That's players, creatures, planeswalkers, whatever is really bothering you at the time. It has flash, which doesn't really matter to us most of the time. You're very scarcely casting it for its converted mana cost, which is 8. But putting into play for 3 mana, blowing up stuff for 5, and then attacking for 5 is a good utility to have in the deck. Dragon Mage is one of my favorite dragons. One of my favorite things to do in the game is wheel, which is discard your hand and draw 7 cards. And whenever Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. And Dragon Mage says, whenever Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand and then draws 7 cards. Doesn't get better than that. I'm such a fan of Dragon Mage. I'm I'm so happy it exists, and putting it into play for 3 mana is just so just beautiful. Drakuseth, Maw of Flames is very similar to Bogarden Hellkite. It just throws damage everywhere. I'll leave it up for a second or two. Nullspine Dragon is similar to Dragon Mage. When it enters, you may discard your hand and draw cards equal to the amount of damage dealt to target opponent this turn. So that's one opponent. This is good with things like Pandemonium and such, where it enters and deals damage. But if you have a way to deal damage before you tutor it into play, it's just a one-sided wheel. Doesn't let your opponents draw any more cards. If you so choose, it is a May ability, so you can just have it be a 7 mana 7/5 with flying, which is a good body. It sure does attack really well. Lathless is a 6 mana 6/6 flying. Whenever a non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Every dragon gets another dragon. You don't have to cast them. You can put them into play off Zirilan, so that's really awesome. I'm a big fan of that. Dragons you control also can get 1/0 power and toughness for 1 and a red. So if you have infinite mana, you can infinitely pump all of your dragons. Or even just like pay 6 mana and give them all +3/+0. That's not a bad rate. I'd do that in a turn. Leyline Tyrant is interesting. Flying 4/4 for 4. When Leyline Tyrant dies, you may pay any amount of red mana. When you do, it deals that much damage to any target. We're in a deck that is going to be making a lot of red. I'll get into that later. But when it dies, you just get to lightning bolt something or deal 20 damage to something. That could be a player, that could be a creature, that could be whatever you need it to be. Notably, Zirilan says exile it at end of turn. So to make this creature die, there are some roundabout ways to go about that. We can get into them later, but it comes down to just being able to sacrifice it before the end of turn trigger. So that's not too hard to do. Rapacious Dragon gets you 2 treasures when it enters, so it really effectively costs you 1 to put it into play off Zirilan. That's not super bad, but there are things you can do to abuse this enter the battlefield trigger. Making treasures is great. Runehorn Hellkite, pay 5 and a red, exile it from your graveyard. Each player discards his or her hand, then draw 7 cards. Wheel from the graveyard is super sweet. It's like Echo of Aeons, but it's a dragon that you can attack with first and then get value from later. I'm a big fan of this card. Ryusei, the Falling Star. When Ryusei dies, again, you have to figure out a way to make Ryusei die, but that's part of the deck. It deals 5 damage to each creature without flying, so your dragons remain unscathed. Zirilan will take damage, and that's kind of unfortunate, but board wiping your opponents sometimes is really important, so having that available to you in your dragon package is really sweet. Scourge of Valkus is a lot of words. It's a 4/4 for 2 red, so 5, flying. Whenever Scourge of Valkus or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to a target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control. And for 1 red mana, it has fire breathing. This effect is sweet. There is another card that does that, Dragon Tempest. It's the same text, just not on a dragon. But Dragon Tempest also gives your creature with flying haste when they enter the battlefield, so that's a sweet card. But Scourge of Valkus, if it enters the battlefield at the same time as any other dragon, we can get into that later, it deals X damage X times, which is really sweet, so we can talk about that later too. Shivan Hellkite, when you have infinite mana and you just need everyone to die, this is 1 and a red, deal 1 damage to target creature or player. It's not unreasonable for us to win the game this way. I've done it many times. I really like this card. It's better than fire breathing in my opinion. Skyline Despot, when it enters the battlefield, it's a 5. Skyline Despot, it's a 5/5 for 5 red, so 7. when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you're the monarch, put a 5/5 red dragon token into play. A lot of the time you'll lose the monarch because blocking is tough in this deck. You're not going to have a lot of creatures to block with. However, drawing a card and presenting the monarch to the battlefield is sweet. It'll give people reason to attack other people after they take it from you. And if you do get to keep it for an entire turn cycle, you get a free 5/5 out of it. So there's reason to have this in the deck, plus drawing cards is always sweet. Steel Hellkite, much like Ryusei, when it's a 5/5 4/6 with flying, and you can pay 2 colorless to give it 1/0, so kind of bad fire breathing. And you can pay X, destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So you have to hit someone with it, and then you have to activate X after you do that. You can do that immediately after. It is a instant speed ability. And you hit one person and destroy all of something that costs X. So if X is 0, you get rid of all of their tokens. If it's 4, you get rid of all of their 4-drops. This is a really good utility. We are lacking in board wipes. We have 5 total, I believe, including Ryusei and Steel Hellkite. So having this ability to get rid of permanents that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get rid of is really sweet on a creature that you can tutor to the battlefield. Terror of Mount Velis, when it enters, give your creatures double strike. This is just a blowout. People don't see it coming, but attacking for 10 on top of any other creatures you control with flying that could be attacking that turn it's incredible. This card is awesome. Terror of the Peaks, similar to Scourge of Valkus, has flying. It's 5/4 for 3 red. And spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast, so they have to lightning bolt themselves every time they want to target it, but that's usually just once after they remove it. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So it takes their power, and the Terror will deal it to any target, which is different because it's not scaling like Scourge if you have many dragons on the battlefield at a time. But it is a base amount, so at least like 4 or 5. Tyrant's Familiar, 5/5 for 5 red, so 7. Flying Haste Lieutenant, as long as you control your commander, which you often will when you activate it. Tyrant's Familiar gets +2/+2 and has, whenever Tyrant's Familiar attacks, it deals 7 damage to target creature defending player's controls. It just blows something up and attacks for 7 with haste. It's a pretty sweet dragon. And finally, our last dragon is Udvara Hellkite. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, create a 6/6 red dragon creature token with flying. This is sweet. It's different from Lathless. It's not legendary, but also it just cares when the dragons attack, which can happen multiple times, way more times than you can make a dragon enter the battlefield. Sometimes the situations change, but also this just being a 6/6 flying for 8, cheating it into play for 3 mana is such a good rate. It's a obvious include. It just gets, crazy when you have 2 things that attack and suddenly you get 12 more power out of it. Notably, they don't enter attacking. They can block, and the turn after they can attack and make more dragons. It's not non-token. It's every token, or every dragon, excuse me. So any dragon that attacks, you get to just make another one. It's sweet. It scales. In the creatures also, there is a small package of cards that either get you mana, like Goblin Engineer, Goblin Matron gets you Engineer. There's also Dockside Extortionist. When Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. Usually this is at least 4. People play mana rocks, people play artifact lands, and you just get a treasure for each of them. This card can easily make you 6 treasures when you play it, and when you play it for 2, it ramps crazily. So we have a small package of creatures that can tutor that, it being Imperial Recruiter and Goblin Matron. We also have things like Ornithopter of Paradise and Iron Mirror. Those are both just mana producing creatures that you can play on curve. So besides all the creatures, we also have a suite of sorceries that do a bunch of stuff. Cathartic Reunion draws you some cards. Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature. Like I said before, we're not blocking very often, and being able to wipe everything just gives us more time to assemble some kind of dragon engine. Not the literal dragon engine, but we get to have time to do what we need to do. Chain Reaction does the same thing. It deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So if there's like 5, everything takes 5. For 4 mana, it's red Wrath of God. Card's not super terrible. It does have trouble getting rid of big creatures, but there are other ways to get rid of big creatures, namely Chaos Warp and other similar shuffling effects. Also a fun include for me personally is Dragonstorm. I love this card so much. It's 8 and a red, so 9 mana. Search your library for a dragon permanent card, similar to what Zirilan references, and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library, and it has Storm. So if you manage to cast a ramp spell or a ritual or just a creature or anything else, and then suddenly have 9 mana, you can tutor for up to as many dragons as in your deck, as many spells you cast that turn. I love casting this spell because you get to resolve all of them individually and make good like stacks of dragons that enter the battlefield. Those are really sweet. This is just a card that I've been in love with for a long time, and I look forward to playing it every chance that I get. Faithless Looting, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards for 1 red mana is irreplaceable. This card is so good. Flashback for 2 and a red. After you wheel or after you play it, you just get to do it again later. Very solid. Wouldn't play red without it. Gamble, search your library for a card, put that card into your hand to discard a card at random, then shuffle your library. There's a lot of assumed risk with casting Gamble that you need to tutor for something that you wouldn't mind losing or is available to you later. We do have ways of casting things from our graveyard if we're getting an instant or sorcery, and we have means of bringing creatures back from the graveyard if you tutor for a creature. Lands are tough, enchantments are tough. We have ways of getting back artifacts if we need to. So Gamble's really predicated on being able to recur the thing that you tutor for. But if you build around Gamble and tutor around Gamble, then you can make it work in your favor, and it's not really that much of a gamble. Jessica's Will is a broken magic card. 2 and a red, sorcery, choose 1. If you control your commander, choose both. If you control your commander as you cast this spell, so they can get rid of your commander in the meantime, but if you have it as you cast it, you just get both anyways, so it's great. Add 1 red mana for each card in target opponent's hand and exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Not often do we see cards that make mana and draw cards, so you can play the cards that you draw. Manamorphose is one of those, but it doesn't really like generate you mana. It just kind of shapes your mana how you need it. This card can easily generate you mana. If your opponent has 7 cards in their hand, this is 3 mana, make 7 mana, so you're up 4. That's a rate that's not really seen in other cards. So it's a super good utility. Mana Geyser, 3 red, add red to your mana pool for each tapped land your opponent controls. This card is really sweet. It can easily make you 15 in the late game or more. Mizzix's Mastery is 3 and a red. Exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Exile Mizzix's Mastery, overload 5 red. So the way it's worded, you exile 1 thing, but if you overload it, you replace target with each. So you can generate a pile of cards in your graveyard that you would target one of, but instead you cast all of them. And usually that can be ending with Dragonstorm, which is why I wanted to get to this card later. when you generate a bunch of mana and overload, and then you can set up a pile to Dragonstorm, you can Dragonstorm for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard, so long as you cast all of them before that. And usually that'll just win you the game outright. There isn't a way to give all of your creatures haste, but there are ways to have them all deal damage. And the ones that can attack will do their best. Dragonstorm is just so sweet. I love it so much. Okay, Reality Scramble. This is a awesome piece of tech for this deck. I was mentioning earlier that we have to work around Zirilan's ability, exiling the dragon that we will lose at the end of the turn. If we don't destroy it, sacrifice it, or make it otherwise leave the battlefield somehow, it gets exiled. Reality Scramble says put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library. This is perfectly fine. It's not going to exile it. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that shares a card type with that permanent. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and retrace. I'll get to retrace in a second. But with this, if you have 3 mana and then you activate Zirilan, put a dragon onto the battlefield, and then you need to get rid of it, you can pay 4 mana, Reality Scramble, get a different dragon. That could either be a enter the battlefield trigger, or just a good attack next turn, or a blocker, or whatever you need. It just makes the creature not go away, and it can sometimes be a better creature. There are times where you hit Ornithopter Paradise, that's fine, it makes mana, you don't lose anything by casting this spell. And with Retrace, you end up with a lot of cards, a lot of stray lands in your hand after you play them. Sometimes you wheel and you'll have an extra land in your hand. You can Reality Scramble from your graveyard with Retrace, and it won't exile it. You can just do it as many times as you need to. So you can set up a chain of Zirilan activate, shuffle the thing that you tutor for, get something else, which is awesome because you can tutor the same thing every turn, like Rapacious Dragon, which will make you 2 mana to cast the Reality Scramble. So your cycle can be a total of 5 mana to put any creature from your deck into play permanently. I think this is an awesome include, and I was really excited to start playing it when I figured out that you could do that. Reforge the Soul is Wheel of Fortune with Miracle. So Miracle is, you can cast this card for its Miracle cost when you draw it, if it's the first card you draw this turn. So if you randomly just run into it, it's Wheel of Fortune for 2 mana instead of 5. But Wheel of Fortune for 5 mana is a good Wheel of Fortune anyways. I love casting Wheel of Fortune, and discarding your hand to draw 7 cards is a perfect ability for this deck. Vandal Blast, there was a time where I ran into a bunch of artifacts and I couldn't do anything about them, so I put this card in here. I don't usually run things like Vandal Blast, but I think it's worth running, and it's not the only overload card in the deck, so it's it is what it is. Destroy target artifact you don't own, replace it, destroy each artifact you don't own. It's a one-sided board wipe. It's a lot like Cyclonic Rift, but it's it's solid. I think this card's awesome. And then finally, my favorite card of all time, hands down, Wheel of Fortune. Both players must discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. Man, they just would put anything on a card back then. So this card actually says each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. This was made before Commander existed, so there was no 4-player format. And it referencing both players is just proof that the game was intended for 2 people, and we're really going against what they're going for with Magic. Jokes. 2 instants, we have Chaos Warp to get rid of those pesky permanents that mono red typically has trouble dealing with, like enchantments and artifacts that would get around other artifact hate, lands that are giving us problems, creatures that are unkillable with damage, things like that. And Seething Song is just a good rate, 2 and a red for red. That is 5 red if you're counting. It just puts you on Zirilan on turn 3, which I'm a big fan of. I won't get too into all of the specific artifacts, but I will get into some of the themes. We have mana rocks like Grim Monolith, Basalt Monolith, Liquid Metal Torque, And then we have a bunch of means of copying abilities. So we have Mage Stone untaps a creature with an activated ability that is tap ability. This can either be Goblin Engineer or Iron Mirror, but it's Zirilan. You're activating Zirilan twice, which is 7 mana. So it's 3 untap for 1, and then another 3. So that's not unreasonable. We are going to have a lot of mana, and we're going to achieve that by doubling our lands. We are running I might be missing one, but we are running most available artifacts that double our mana, including 1 enchantment, which is Mana Flare. But the artifacts that we are playing are Extraplanar Lens, which requires us to put a mountain under it, Gauntlet of Might, which buffs all of our opponents' mountains and red creatures, Gauntlet of Power, which is the same as Gauntlet of Might for 1 more mana, but it does any color, so any deck can run it, and then Caged Sun, which only gives our creatures buff and only buffs our lands for 6 mana. So all of those combined let us double our mana, including Mana Flare, and let us have a ton of mana to work with during our turns, so that when we're activating Zirilan, it doesn't cost that much, and we still have other mana to cast other spells with during our turn. Pyre of Heroes is an awesome means. It's similar to Reality Scramble in you sacrifice the creature and go get a creature that shares a type. So you go get a dragon that costs 1 more. You can't do this to your 8 drops because there's no 9 drop in the deck, but you can do this to your 7 drops and go get like Udvar Hellkite and just reap the benefits of paying 2 mana. And a total of 5 mana for those creatures is very similar to Reality Scramble if you're doing the Rapacious Dragon loop. Rings of Brighthearth is infinite mana with Basalt Monolith, and also is double activations with Zirilan. Again, it's 5 mana for getting 2 things. There are a lot of ways to do this, and this is a really good one. Staff of Completion, a very new card. I was initially very mild on this card. I was like, this doesn't do anything for anyone. This does exactly what we want it to do for us and us alone. We are on our pillar with our dragon holding a stick. Pay 1 life, destroy target permanent you own. Thumbs up. Put that dragon right in our graveyard. We'll figure out how to get it back later. It doesn't exile the creature, and we are so happy that it doesn't. It also lets us destroy creatures that our opponents gain control of. So if like they have Insurrectioned us, which happened to me recently, it was in 2023, that's crazy. Destroy target permanent you own. It doesn't matter who controls it, you can destroy your own creature, which is sad, but it is what it is. Like, you'd rather them not have it than you get hit by it. So we take those. Staff of Domination has a bunch of text, but it's just a way to draw our deck with infinite mana, like from Rings of Brighthearth and Basalt Monolith, which is really easy to put together with Goblin Engineer, excuse me. So there's a lot of ways to get all of that mana. Oh baby, Sundial of the Infinite for 2 mana and 1 to activate. End the turn, activate only on your turn. Just keep the dragon just for 1 mana. You just get to keep it. It doesn't go away. The end never happens. You wait for the trigger happens, then you just end the turn. It's over. You get to keep it. It's your dragon now. Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves are good protection for Zirilan. You get to just make it so that your opponents have a hard time targeting any of your things and giving your things haste when they need to attack. Telgelad Stylus, I'm very medium on. It is a card that came up on my EDH rec searches when I was looking up how to build Zirilan. People were recommending playing this. It puts the dragon that you tutor for back into your deck. So it's like a 1 mana Reality Scramble, but you don't get anything out of it. But it is useful because you can tutor the dragon up later. You get to keep them. I'm not opposed to playing it, and I think there are other better ways to do what it wants to do. Importantly, though, it does cost 1 mana, and it is an artifact, so you can search for it off of Urza Saga in the event that you need to put a card back into your library this way. I appreciate that. I think redundancy is good like that, so it's included. 1,000 Year Elixir is the same as Mage Right Stone, except it gives Zirilan haste if you need to do that. Unstable Obelisk can get rid of things the same way that Chaos Warp can get rid of things. It's indiscriminate, and it just costs a lot of mana, but we're planning to have a lot of mana anyways, so it's not that bad. And Wayfarer's Bauble is mono red ramp. It's just what we got these days. It's pretty good. Shivan Harvest is a interesting include for me. I've known about this card for a while, but I've never really had a home for it. It doesn't really make it into Aristocrats. It doesn't really make it into a lot of things. But in this specifically, having an enchantment in play that's just kind of innocuous, and people are like, well, that doesn't seem... Like, it goes under the radar. It's one of those non-Lightning Rod cards, which I would love to talk about for an extended period of time, but it's innocuous, and it just gives you value for making sure that you don't get rid of your things. If you activate this, sacrifice a creature, destroy target non-basic land. Your dragon doesn't go away forever. It does go to the graveyard, but you can figure out ways, like with Feldon, to reanimate them. Reanimate, you can get a token from your graveyard. But it sits there, and it waits for you to use it, and when it's ready to do so, you do it, and you get rid of their Guy's Cradle or their Thespian Stage, or really whatever is bothering you at that point. I'm a fan, and it could be other things. There could be other better things like Ashnod's Altar or something like that, but I feel like this is a good, reasonable include in this deck. Bitter Reunion is kind of nasty. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. It's similar to Cathartic Reunion and what is that spell? Thrill of Possibility. You discard a card, draw 2 cards. Drawing cards in this deck is pretty essential. You need a bunch of stuff to do that, and we have some. But your main way of doing it is tutoring off of Zirilan and getting a dragon that will draw you cards. So there's that. But the important thing is, after it has done the thing that it wants to do, which is enter the battlefield and draw you 2 cards, you can sacrifice it, and creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. This is very similar to Dragon Tempest, and it gives your creatures haste, which in this deck specifically, when you're putting things onto the battlefield and you want things to be attacking as soon as they come out, just paying 1 mana and giving all of your things that just entered the battlefield haste is pretty sweet. And then finally, the lands. We're not running a ton. We are running 19 mountains. I'll start with that. We need a bunch of mountains to make our gauntlet package, our gauntlet type cards package good. And I think I wanted at least 15, and then I just ran the extra 4 because I figure it's just a good amount. It's near 20% of the deck, which is, it's 19% of the deck literally. Or no, it isn't, because there's the commander. Anyway, math. You're also running a bunch of utility lands. Specifically, we have Ancient Tomb, which taps for 2 mana. We want to be playing Zirilan in our artifacts as soon as possible, so getting 2 mana for 2 damage is not terrible. Of course, the 2 damage isn't inconsequential. By the 5th time you've tapped it, it has done 10 damage to you, and gaining life in mono red is very hard. But by the time that you are at that 10 damage, you should have committed stuff to the board that would help you be winning the game at that point. So you really just need to temper your expectations with Ancient Tomb and use the mana as you can. Blast Zone enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it, and it taps for a colorless, and you can pay XX to put X charge counters on it, so you can pay 4, get 2, pay 2, get 1, that kind of thing. And for 3 mana and tap, sacrifice to Blast Zone, destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Blast Zone. It's a board wipe land that you can tutor off of Expedition map, and it can get rid of all of a converted mana cost that is bothering you. Could be 1, can't be 0, unfortunately, so all of their tokens are just going to have to get removed another way, but that's not impossible. and it can get around hexproof and other things that would be normally hard to get rid of in mono red. Crystal Vein is it taps for a colorless and adds 2 colorless by sacrificing it. This is sweet. It's just good ramp. It lets you get Zirilan out quicker or any of your artifacts that you need out. I'll skip to Dwarven Runes. It's the same thing, except it comes into play tapped, but it makes red mana. So it's tap for a red or sacrifice it to add 2 red. Again, we just want quicker mana. We want a means of getting Zirilan out quicker. I'm a fan. Demolition Field is the strict upgrade to Field of Ruin. It says tap to add a colorless, or 2 tap, sacrifice Demolition Field, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. That land controller may search their library for basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. You can do the same. Before it was each player, so you would ramp your other 2 opponents a land, and that was good for them. There was no downside for them. But this one just lets you and the player that you're targeting with it get a land. And it's inherently more fair, per se, but it does let you get rid of non-basics indiscriminately that you need to. Endless Sands is an interesting one. It's a tutorable Telgelad Stylus type card where you can pay 2 and exile target creature you control. So it does save your creatures from exile with Zirilan. And you can pay 4 to return each creature exiled with Endless Sands to the battlefield. So there's inherently more value in Endless Sands. You can just shove a bunch of stuff under it, hoping it doesn't get destroyed by like a wasteland or something, and then bring them back later. So after a couple turns of shoving some dragons into the sand and bring them out later, you just get to cheat a bunch of mana, which I think is kind of valuable. And it's not super commitment heavy to run a colorless land in a mono-colored deck, especially one that you can tutor off of Exploration map. Inventor's Fair is the only card in the deck that gains you life. Welcome to gaining 1 life a turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain a life if you control 3 or more artifacts. It taps for a colorless, and you can search your library for a artifact card by paying 4 and sacrificing it. Only activate if you control 3 or more artifacts. This is good tutoring. It's an obvious included in an artifact-heavy deck like this. We're running a bunch of things that we need at different times. This can be any of those, and it can also just be gain a life every turn, which adds up when you're playing Ancient Tomb and other means of paying life for things like Staff of Completion. Finally, Myriad Landscape gets you 2 basics from your deck. Not much to go over there. It's just more ramp, gets you Zirilan a turn earlier. And then finally, Urza Saga. This land is really sweet. It's one of my favorite lands. It's a saga. So you start with Chapter 1, it gains tap, add a colorless. Chapter 2 is 2 tap and create a 0/0 colorless artifact construct creature token with it gets 1/1 for each artifact you control. So it's just a scaling token that can be big if you have a bunch of artifacts, which you plan on doing. Could be treasures from Ancient Copper Dragon or Dockside Extortionist, or it could just be all of your mana ramp or otherwise utility artifacts. And then on Chapter 3, you sacrifice it and search your library for an artifact card with 0 or 1, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. There's a lot of things that cost 1 in this deck. I'm going to show them real quick. Our Urza Saga package looks like this. It's Mana Crypt, which is 2 mana, but deals you 3 damage every turn, so if you're at a low life, you don't want to get this. Expedition Map, which gets you another different land. Could be Endless Sands, could be really whatever you need it to be. It's just good utility. Soul Ring, which is Mana Crypt, but for 1, so this is the obvious better choice. Of the 2, it'll untap every turn and make you 2 mana. Telgelad Stylus is the tutorable version of saving your dragons, which is a theme that you want to be committing to. And Wayfarer's Bauble, which is sacrifice Wayfarer's Bauble, search your library for a basic land, and put that card onto the battlefield tapped. Which could just be like replace itself if you need that. I think getting Soul Ring is usually the correct choice, or Telgelad Stylus. There is a version of the deck where I am playing Mana Vault, as well as Manifold Key. And those get in over things like Shivan Harvest and Telgelad Stylus. And it comes down to what I was talking about in the beginning of the video, where I was saying I want to be feeling something again. And I feel like the inclusion of those cards sacrifices the little things that I look forward to in playing games, when cards that aren't otherwise good and are kind of innocuous are good. Finding those scenarios and like being impressed by otherwise unimpressive cards is something I look forward to. And of course, Man of Vault has already proven itself to me in that it is a very powerful effect, and I always look forward to playing it. But this is a deck that allows me situations where I can make bad cards good, and I love doing that. So I look forward to doing that. And Manifold Key is really good with like Basalt Monolith. It's already good with that card. It's good with Mana Vault. It's good with all of our artifacts, really. Untapping any artifact for 1 mana is a really good utility to search off of Urza Saga. And also has the text to make a creature unblockable, which could be relevant when we're attacking for things. And I guess I'll talk also about some dragons that I didn't include, or just one in particular, Hellkite Tyrant. I don't look forward to taking fun away from people or taking away artifacts from people to win the game. I think that's a method of winning the game that isn't super rewarding for me at this point in my gaming experience. So that card, along with a couple other things that would objectively make this deck better, are just not included. I don't see a point or a real I just don't feel like playing those things, you know? So that's kind of the deck. I'm a huge fan of Zirilan. I've been impressed with how the deck plays so far. It's one of those things where this card came out in what, 1998, I believe, in Mirage. It came out a year after I was born. And this card's been out for a long time, but I've just never had the ability to play it, or never had the thought to. And I'm super happy that I'm getting to now in this this day and age of being able to have enough cards. The card pool since then has expanded wildly, and there's a bunch of good things to put into play and that interact with Zirilan in ways that never existed before, like Staff of Completion and Ancient Copper Dragon, things like that. So I'm really happy to be putting this card on the battlefield, and I am looking forward to tapping it for 3 and making a dragon appear out of nowhere. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, give me tell me what you like about Magic, or what you like about Zirilan, or things that you think I should play in this deck that I think, or you think would be cool. Join our Discord, MTG Homebrew Network. You can find it in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.